Mr. President, we're here tonight in the Senate, hours away from a deadline which will, if action isn't taken on the House side, the other body, we will have a government shutdown. And unfortunately, when I've been asked today by either constituents or reporters, and they asked, is it less likely or more likely that there'll be a shutdown, I've had to be honest and say that at least at this moment, it seems more likely than less likely. And I think we have to examine not just how to try to resolve this in a way that makes sense, but also to remind ourselves how we got here. This isn't the typical battle in Washington. We've had a lot of those, and we should all try to work in a bipartisan fashion. But this one is unique in the sense that you have, on the one side, you have Democrats in Congress, and I think across the country, united in an effort to continue the operations of the government and not have a government shutdown, even if we want to make a point, even if we want to make an argument about this or that policy. You see a growing number of Republicans here in the Senate, I think across the country, maybe even a few in the House, even the last 24 hours or so, who are saying, let's just get the government funded so we can move forward. We might be able to have a debate in the middle of November or somewhere down the road, but let's not hold up the operations of government or default on our obligations for the first time since 1789 in order to make an ideological point or a political point. I think it's clear from the national data that independents are on that side of the argument as well. So you have this consensus on one side, Democrats and independents and Republicans, that you shouldn't, in order to make your point about an issue, whether it's health care or the economy or whatever it is, you shouldn't act in a way that would shut down the government to do that. On the other side, I think you have the far right of the Republican Party that not only believes that in order to make their point, they're willing to allow the government to shut down, but you also have, I think, a determination to do that to the extent that one wing of one party is really driving the train in that party. It happens to be the Republican Party. So this is unusual. It's not the typical Democrat versus Republican debate. And it started months ago where politicians who work in this town would go home to their state or their districts and make the point that they were going to, no matter what, argue that this is the moment where they should stop the health care bill. And no matter what was in their way, they were going to just continue to drive in that direction. So I think that's where that's how we've gotten here. Well, what happens if we go past the deadline and there is a shutdown of a few days or longer? Well, here's what some of the data shows, some of the folks who are not in the Congress but who observe broader trends and especially economic trends. Mark Zandi is a Moody's chief economist. He's, I think, widely respected. I think people in both parties respect his opinion. And according to him, I'm not quoting, but I'm just summarizing what he said, a shutdown lasting a few days would cost the economy 0.2% of GDP, while a longer shutdown could cost as much as 1.4%. Now, sometimes it's difficult to say what does 0.2% of GDP means. Well, what it means for sure is that the economy, which has been moving in the right direction, we've had tremendous job growth over I think 9 quarters now, many months of job growth, but we're not moving fast enough. We're not creating jobs at a fast enough pace. And when I go home to Pennsylvania, people don't say to me, score every point you can for your point of view. They say to me, work together with the other side to create jobs. Work together with the other side to put in place strategies that will lead to job growth, economic growth, and obviously job growth. So if you're going to go in the wrong direction when it comes to growth and you lose 0.2% of growth, and then if the shutdown goes longer, you lose 0.4 or 0.5 or 0.6% over time, you're obviously going in the wrong direction. But we know that when you lose even 2.2% of growth, you're killing jobs. So first and foremost, any shutdown is a big job killer. A default on our obligations would be a much bigger job killer. A shutdown would also not just slow growth, but it would spread anxiety, and this is just human nature. It will spread anxiety among consumers. We know that in the summer of 2011, the almost default on our obligations caused consumer confidence to take a nosedive. We didn't come out of that hole of consumer confidence until many, many months later. The government shutdown has a similar effect. How about the Chamber of Commerce? Not usually on my side of a lot of debates, or the Democratic side. U.S. Chamber of Commerce has urged Congress to keep the government open and that a shutdown would be, quote, economically disruptive and create even more uncertainties in the U.S. economy. So this is the Chamber of Commerce, which is often making arguments about uncertainty in other contexts, are saying that a shutdown would create even more uncertainty. How about the economic recovery? I mentioned those 9 quarters of growth we've had. We've had job growth as well. Just in terms of how you measure it, 7.5 million jobs, private sector jobs, 7.5 million added in the last 42 months. So that will take a nosedive. So instead of growing at 160,000 jobs a month, roughly, which has been kind of the pace for a while now, which isn't fast enough. We need to be at 200 or 230 or 240 if we really want to say that the economy has taken off. But instead of growing at 160 or 170 or even higher, we hope, we'll go backwards. Maybe the job growth for the next couple of months will be substantially less than that. A shutdown all but ensures that to happen. We don't know exactly how much slowing would, or how much damage would be done to the job growth, but there's going to be a job impact for sure, and I think that's pretty clear from the data. Now, both sides in a lot of debates here in Washington say they stand up for small business. And we can debate that, which side does a better job for small business. But we know one thing. We know that when a small business person needs some help, a measure of help from the federal government, they usually turn to the Small Business Administration. And we know that the SBA, that their approval of applications for business loan guarantees and direct loans to small business would cease. Okay, so if you take the Small Business Administration off the playing field, they average about 1,000 loans or loan guarantees per week. Now that's nationally. What does that mean for Pennsylvania? Well, from October from October 2012 through August of this year, 2013, the SBA supported over 1,400 loans for over $600 million for small businesses in Pennsylvania. On average, that's about 30 loans for over $13 million to entrepreneurs each week. So every week, on average, based upon the recent data in Pennsylvania, 30 loans and $13 million helping small businesses in Pennsylvania. To shut that off would make our economic circumstance even worse. In Pennsylvania, we had many, many months in a row where the unemployment numbers were 500,000 people unemployed or more. Thankfully, it dipped below 500,000 for a couple of months. We just got the numbers from August, because the state numbers are always behind. The state data for August shows we're unfortunately just above 500,000 jobs, 500,000 people out of work. A shutdown will bring that 500,000 person out of work number higher and send it in the wrong direction. How about veterans? People say, well, veterans' disability checks will still go out, just like Social Security checks would go out in the aftermath of a shutdown. Well, that's only part of the story. If you're a veteran getting disability checks or a pension benefit, in our state we've got about 109,000. 109,000 veterans get disability or pension help. They may get their check, but it's highly likely, if not a certainty, that those checks will be delayed. Okay? So you're a veteran, and you're entitled to this because of what you did for our country, and because part of a political party wants to make an ideological point, you've got to wait for your check. You have to wait for your disability check. That makes no sense. And to say that it's unfair to a veteran or his or her family is really an understatement. How about Social Security? People say, well, the checks are going to go out, so people are going to be just fine in a shutdown. Well, that's only part of the story. Yes, current recipients will get their checks, but if you reach the age of 65 and you want to have your application process, you won't be able to do that, or at a minimum, that will be slowed substantially. In our state, every month, more than 11,500 people, about 11,600 people, are able to start the process for their Social Security benefits. Those people will have to wait and wait and wait in the advent of a government shutdown. How about national parks? We have a great blessing in our state where we have an abundance of national parks, historic sites, which are wonderful for the country, wonderful for enrichment and learning and the history, but they also are a big economic driver in different communities. In southeastern Pennsylvania, when you add it all up, one of the numbers I saw was over $200 million of impact. Those, unlike a lot of things I just talked about, those parts of the government will stop completely. So an economic engine in one part of our state that averages about 200 million of economic impact here will just stop, okay? So maybe we'll lose 10 million over the course of a shutdown. Maybe Pennsylvania will lose 20 million or 30 million. So we're going to lose for sure, and a lot of other states will as well. The Flight 93 Memorial is one of those from 9/11. Gettysburg is another. Valley Forge, Independence Park in Philadelphia. So there are lots and lots of examples and lots of job impacts when it comes to all of those. But here's the basic point. Some people would say, well, look, you're in the United States Senate or the House, and you want to have a debate about something as significant and consequential to people's lives or to our economy, like health care, and you ought to be able to debate that. I would agree with that. There's no question about it. We had big debates in 2009 leading up to a vote in the Senate. Then the debate continued into 2010. The bill was enacted in March of 2010. There was still debate about it after that. There were votes taken one after another to repeal it. Then the Supreme Court litigated it. That took months until the Supreme Court made a decision. A Supreme Court which is dominated, or at least the majority have Republican-appointed justices. They said the Affordable Care Act was constitutional. Then you had a presidential election, which was another kind of litigation or debate. And one candidate said, I'm going to keep the Affordable Care Act in place and we're going to implement it. The other side said, we're going to repeal it. Well, the side that said they were going to put it in effect won the election, meaning President Obama. So this has been debated and litigated several different ways in several different branches of our government. That will continue, and frankly, it should continue, because some of the impacts are already in place. We know that. We know, for example, that since 2010, when the consumer protections went into effect, which had nothing to do initially with those who were uninsured, the tens of millions uninsured, but we put in place the consumer protections for those with insurance, those who had coverage, were making payments or premium payments, and yet their children were still not protected because of a pre-existing condition. So up until 2010, it was the law, or it was the prevailing policy that if an insurance company wanted to say to you who were paying premiums, sorry, I know you're making your payments, but your child has a pre-existing condition, they are not covered. Okay, that was permitted when insurance companies had all the power. I would argue all the power and an unfair advantage in bargaining power. So now you have, since 2010, something on the order of 17 million children who can no longer be denied coverage due to a pre-existing condition solely and completely because of the Affordable Care Act. You have millions of young people who can stay on their parents' policies from the age of 19 to 25. They can only stay on those policies solely because of the Affordable Care Act, because it was enacted into law. You have millions of seniors who are getting payments over time to help them fill the coverage gap, the so-called donut hole. They're getting those payments solely because of the Affordable Care Act. Now, tomorrow, we're going to see the beginning of the exchanges going up, where people can go into a marketplace and shop for the best possible health care insurance that they can afford. Most people, probably as many as 150 million Americans, already have coverage, and their employer provides it. So their status won't change that much, if at all. But these things are going into effect over time, so I would hope the people who want to keep debating it and make changes to it, and I voted for changes as well, would allow it to be, if not fully implemented, something close to fully over the next couple of months, or maybe even the next couple of years. And then at some point, this debate about who is right or who is wrong about the impact will have been determined. So we're all for debates on the budget and on health care and everything else, but we shouldn't bring the country to these cliffs. The cliff meaning this deadline tonight on the budget, where the House has our legislation, which is just about the budget. They could pass it. It will pass, by the way, if the Speaker puts it on the floor tonight. It would pass. We would be beyond this crisis. Then we'd move to the next deadline, and we could get beyond these deadlines and then have a big debate and have very strong arguments made about how we get a full year's worth of a budget starting in the middle of November. That's the appropriate time and the appropriate place to make arguments about the budget or the economy or jobs or health care or whatever else it is. Now is not the time, and I would hope